Hello there, my name is Rodrigue Delrue, community developer on Crusader Kings 3, and welcome to our August video update, during which we discuss the development of the game. This one will be the last video before we push Crusader Kings 3 out in the open, and we've discussed still quite a lot of topics. With Magna, we have chatted about performance and AI. With Matthew, we've discussed about modding and how to transform the game as you see fit. With Alexander, we have discussed legacies and why they are useful to you in the game. Finally, with Yuan, we have taken a look at achievements. And stick around to the end because I want to introduce you to someone very special. With Magne, programmer here at Paradox, we have chatted about performance and AI and how to make the game run smoothly on your computer.
So throughout CK3's development, performance has been a major priority. We've considered it from an early date onwards, and especially as release has gotten closer and closer, we've spent more and more time on it to ensure that it's up to a level we're happy with. The two systems we've reworked the most that affect performance are threading and rendering, and they're heavily tied together since the rendering system is also heavily threaded. So for these two systems, we reworked them from the ground up. The threading system is now based on systems rather than individual characters or other objects. This allows us to get a better balance between threads so more work can be done at the same time. It also significantly simplifies the restrictions on what we can do while we're threaded, so that it's easier to program and thus fewer mistakes will be introduced, such as crashes, out of syncs, or other strange behavior. For rendering, what we did is we made it threaded rather than done on the main thread. So what this effectively means is that rendering can happen while we're updating the game state. So as the game state is changing, we're still rendering frames instead of having to periodically wait to render a frame. Overall, these changes mean that if you have multiple cores, especially if you have a lot of them, you get better performance than before. It also makes it easier for us to further develop these systems in a performant manner, meaning that we should have good gains after release as well, and since they've been reworked in a way where it's harder to make mistakes as a programmer, it should mean fewer bugs too. So with the AI, we've had three main goals. The first goal is that it should provide some level of challenge, because you don't want to just steamroll from the beginning, because that's not very fun for most players. Additionally, it shouldn't do things that are frustrating to the player, even if they might technically be a smart thing to do. And third, it should feel like it's a plausible actor in a medieval world. We've taken a different approach in some ways from CK2 when it comes to the AI, but the core of it is still pretty similar. I think the biggest changes are in the military AI, where we've reworked it from the ground up to be more based on allowing multiple participants to do well together rather than acting individually. On the non-military side, on the other hand, it's pretty similar to before in like the basic design philosophy. It's rebuilt, of course, so it's generally better, but the basic idea is still to be a plausible actor, and we've managed that by checking for possible actions at specific intervals and then taking actions that make sense, and by having some randomization here and just good rules for when the different actions make sense, we end up constructing a narrative where they look like they are an actual medieval ruler. There are parts of the AI in CK3 that are a lot more moddable than they were in CK2. There are still parts that you can't especially mod, especially the military AI, but things like interactions are far more moddable than they were before, as most of the interaction AI goes through script instead of code. The goal of the non-military AI is to make the world feel alive. It's not just there to be a challenge to you, but the main priority is instead that the world feels like it could be an actual medieval world. Sometimes that means the AI will act against you, other times it means it'll help you, and other times it'll just do things that don't affect you in any way, but help ensure that this world feels like it is actually alive. Sometimes we have had to have some restrictions on the AI for how it interacts with the player, just so that it doesn't get overwhelming or frustrating. Like the prime example here is seduction, where at various stages in the game we've needed to tweak the rules there so that if the player is playing a woman rather than a man, they don't get just 100 seduction attempts constantly. Because while that might be sadly quite realistic in some ways, it's not an experience you want in the game, or in reality. The military AI in CK3 has been restructured to be more focused on working together when there's multiple participants on one side in the war. Instead of each individual character having their own AI and sending their own troops based on a variety of factors, they're all pooled together, and one coordinator on each side of the war will handle all of the AI participants. This means that the AI works much better together with other AIs, which is very nice in cases like the Great Holy Wars, where there are a lot of AIs on the same side of a war. Stops them from running around like headless chickens quite as much. One of them is that if the AI realizes that the war is clearly lost, it will be willing to stand and fight rather than keep running for its life. It'll pick a nice defensible location and wait for you to come and deal with it, thus inflicting the maximum possible of casualties, but bringing the war to a quicker end. So we've taken AI into account in the design more than we have in previous games, so AI has always been a consideration early on just to see if a design makes sense for the AI and whether the AI will be able to interact with it well. Sometimes this has meant that we've had to do minor tweaks to make the AI work better, and sometimes systems have had larger changes, or we've seen that of a few possible alternatives, all of which would be good for the player, one would be clearly better for the AI, and thus we go with that one because the player experience overall will be better. A prime example of that is the whole fort system in CK3. Where in CK3 you can move past fort still, but if you do so you will incur attrition, and the AI will almost never do this because it's usually a really bad idea to do so, and that means that we restrict the possible options for the AI significantly, and it's thus easier to find a good path to pursue. And similarly for the player, it also restricts their options some and then makes it simpler for the player to figure out what to do and removes the temptation to try to chase down the enemy army past their force, for instance. So far I've talked a lot about how the enemy will work and how AIs will work together, but you might be wondering, how does the AI work when it's on your side? And the major thing there is that it tries to largely help you rather than pursue its own goals. Most of the time it will stick very close to your armies and offer support in sieges and in battles. Even if it's a losing proposition and it'll lose its army, it will follow you into battle because it's your ally and that's what it's supposed to be doing. This mainly kicks in if you're the primary participant. If you're being called into the war, it'll do its own thing rather than help you because it's trying to win the war. But if it's your war that it's trying to win, then it'll do almost everything in its power to help you out.
With Matthew, also programmer, we have chatted about modding and how modders are going to be able to transform the game completely, from small UI changes to complete overhaul of the games. Have a look.
The team and I wanted to focus a lot on mods as it's very close to our hearts. A lot of us got started at Paradox due to working with mods. I, for example, started working on modding on Crusader Kings 2, and that's got me initially started at Paradox as a content designer before I then moved into being a programmer. So it's a great opportunity for us to be able to give back to the community and help drive forwards the modding of our games. We wanted to improve our character interaction system for CK3 by unifying it with one overall system so that there isn't a difference between how an important interaction that was previously hard-coded in CK2 would work versus how any interaction that we wanted people to be able to make could work. So it all goes through the same system, so it's open to be changed by mods as well as our in-house content designers. The biggest benefit of this new system is that mods can change any of the targets of interactions, any of the AI weighting, how often they're checked, and be able to engage with the system a lot more and change any custom behaviors they need for their own mods. Combining multiple mods has always been difficult in games, even in CK2. For CK3, we wanted to improve the ability for small mods to combine with each other and for submods to combine, so you can overwrite individual entries, such as overriding just one trait, just by using the same key, instead of needing to overwrite the entire file of hundreds of traits. It means if you want to just have one small mod, you can just override what the lunatic trait does, so it will be in one file and more easily compatible with mods that other people make, instead of needing to have to manually do compatibility patches for very small changes. All of the new interface utilities we have, such as alerts, issues, and notifications, are fully moddable. You can create your own new ones to explain how you can use your own mod mechanics, instead of having to rely on harder to read explanations in events instead of more easy to understand interfaces designed specifically to communicate such information. The interface is incredibly moddable. We have links between the main scripting language for events and the GUI scripting language, which, albeit different, is still quite easy to pick up in comparison to a full programming language. And these things can be linked together so you can make your own custom interfaces for your mod-specific features. For example, in a fantasy mod, you can have interfaces designated for your magic features instead of having to go through normal basic interactions and pop-ups. For CK3, we wanted one unified system for all interactions instead of just being a split between the hard-coded ones and the ones we can mod. So things like arranging a marriage, which in CK2 was very unmoddable, is now goes through the same system so that it can be changed by modders as well as our in-house designers without needing any changes in the code. To make modding the UI easier, we have a GUI debug mode, which allows you to view the hierarchy of all the GUI elements and allow you to open to the file and line that that element is defined in, so it's easier to debug and change things when you're trying to make your mods.
With Alexander Altner, lead game designer on the project, we have taken a look at legacies and how they affect your gameplay.
Legacies are unlocked by having a grand dynasty and spreading them out over the world. The more spread out they are, the more renown you get, and you spend this renown on dynasty legacies, which are powerful, but not as powerful as lifestyles perks that apply to everyone in your dynasty. Legacies have various effects that apply to everyone in your dynasty, and they are sources of, for example, piety, prestige, better guests. Depending on which dynasty legacy track you decide to go down, you get different bonuses that are tailored to your specific playstyle. Depending on where you are in the world, you will want to unlock different legacies. There are several really awesome legacy tracks to choose from. Personally, it depends on where I'm playing. If, for example, I am located in the crossroads between India and the Middle East, I like Warfare because it's really good when you are being attacked. You get bonuses such as more effective knights, and ultimately you can even recruit a regiment of House Guard, or use a man-at-arms slot to purchase additional man-at-arms. You also get lifestyle experience boosts somewhere in the middle of the track, but you always want to progress through an entire track when you're playing because the bonuses at the end are very powerful. Another one I like is Erudition. Erudition is great when you're playing in the middle of a large realm like the Holy Roman Empire, for example. It starts up by giving you bonuses to attracting guests, and guests are vital to expanding within such a big realm. You then proceed to get more piety, and ultimately you get a bonus that makes all of your counselors more effective, which is a fantastic bonus.
And finally, with Yuan, content designer here at Paradox, we have chatted about achievements and the grand challenges you're gonna face when playing CK3.
The process for coming up with achievements on CK3 is an extremely simple process. It's a collaborative effort by most of the team. We have a large document that people can file suggestions into, and then the game director picks from amongst those. The biggest challenge when designing achievements for CK3 is unquestionably the puns. CK3 is a large team, they're a very punny team, and they have a lot of jokes that they want to make. I am not a very punny person, and implementing Almost There for Almost RPAD nearly killed me. Other than that, it can be a little tricky to convert the more esoteric suggestions into workable script. Usually if something's going to take an age to get right, we'd prefer to adjust the achievement a little bit rather than try and cram the specific wording into the game in a workable format. If it's too weird to describe in script, then it's going to be too weird for players to understand in play, and we'd prefer achievements to be fun and clear. Not necessarily easy, mind you, but they should always be understandable. You should always know what you need to do. So inarguably my favorite achievement would be Give a Dog a Bone. This is a reference to the House de Canossa family motto, which is a 1,000-year-old pun which the entire content design team was pranked by during development. It is a bit embarrassing, but I'm very glad that it got memorialized. My second favorite achievement would have to be An Unfortunate Accident, which is the achievement you get when you inherit a title from someone you murder. The image for it is just two hands doing air quotes, and it's such a simple joke, but I kind of love it. And finally, my third favorite achievement, definitely worth an honorable mention, would have to be a perfect circle. This is the achievement for getting the maximum amount of feasible inbreeding on a single character. We do have a former biologist working at the company. We checked it through her. We had to get code to extend some functionality a little bit. It's a whole thing, or it was a whole thing. It's absolutely abhorrent, but it's a very CK achievement.
And that was it for the month of August. On behalf of the Crusader Kings 3 team, we sincerely hope that you will enjoy the game, and we are looking forward to your feedback. If you want to know more about Crusader Kings 3, just click on the links below to check their dev diaries. And if you want to pre-order Crusader Kings 3, just go on crusaderkings.com. And finally, I want to say goodbye to you, because I am transitioning roles within Paradox, and I will leave my position to Troy, who will now introduce himself. Troy, take it away.
Howdy y'all, my name is Troy Pruitt, and I'm the current community manager for Imperator, and I will be the future community manager for Crusader Kings 3 once Rod transitions to his new role here at Paradox. Look forward to seeing y'all, and hope y'all come back now. You hear?